Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking into a really disturbing case. We're using police interrogation transcripts, news reports you shared,
Yeah.
basically trying to understand the red flags.
Yeah, focusing on a suspect's behavior right after his wife's death. It's about those initial hours, the questioning.
Exactly how someone acts under that kind of pressure.
It tells you a lot, or potentially tells you a lot.
So the basics.
Yeah.
David Tronis calls 911, says he found his wife, Shanti Cooper, unresponsive, in the bathtub.
And we're going to dig into that call and then what happened when the police started questioning him.
But even before the formal interview, things felt off, based on these reports anyway.
Definitely. The first big thing is the delay. How long it took him to call 911. We're talking something like 12 hours based on the timeline. That's unusual.
12 hours. Wow. Okay, and his behavior at the scene.
Right. There are descriptions of him doing CPR, but in the living room, not the bathroom. And the tub, he said she was in the tub, but apparently it wasn't even full. And then at the police station, before the actual interrogation starts, more odd details.
Yeah, like changing his clothes. He had blood on him, apparently, but changed into a custody suit.
Right, and asking for water, a blanket, then just being left alone for over 4 hours.
4 hours alone in a room? After finding your wife like that?
Makes you think, doesn't it? How would you react? Would those be your first concerns? Water, a blanket.
It feels disconnected. The politeness, the lack of urgency compared to what he supposedly just went through.
That disconnect is key. The event he reported versus this sort of calm demeanor focusing on his own comfort. It raises questions right away. Why these responses?
So the interrogation finally kicks off. It's 9:08 p.m. Detectives Sprague and McCullen come in.
Yep. And almost immediately, David starts with requests.
Water first, then the restroom. Then he says he's starving, asks for saltines, maybe peanut butter crackers.
Think about that. Just found your wife unresponsive, possibly dead, and you're starving. Requesting specific snacks.
It's a strange priority list.
It can be a sign, maybe, of someone not really emotionally processing the gravity of the situation, focusing on basic physical needs instead.
And the detectives, how are they handling this?
Well, they seem sympathetic, outwardly, but it's strategic. They make it clear he's not under arrest.
Right. He can walk out.
Exactly. They want him comfortable. They want him talking. Let him give his version.
So they're trying to establish a baseline, see how he acts naturally.
Precisely. They're observing everything, his requests, his reactions, looking for anything that doesn't quite fit.
And then the crying starts, or the fake crying. The report mentions this is the first of 11 times.
11 times. And crucially, the report notes the detectives knew it was fake. They recognized it as an act.
Wow. So he's putting on a performance.
It certainly looks that way, trying to show grief rather than genuinely feeling it, maybe. When it happens repeatedly and the detectives pick up on the lack of sincerity, it suggests manipulation, trying to control their perception.
Okay, so they move on to background stuff,
Yep.
basic info.
Yeah, like hair, eye color. He struggles to remember his home phone number, which is interesting.
A bit weird under stress, maybe? Or maybe not.
Could be. He talks about moving to Florida in 2013, meeting Shanti online on Match.com about 5 months before the move.
So they met online, moved in together fairly quickly, bought a house in April 2015.
Right. Building that timeline of their life together.
But the house ownership, that's a sticking point in these documents, you said.
Oh, absolutely. The house wasn't in Shanti's name at all, only David's and his mother's in a trust.
For planning and financial reasons, he claims.
That's his explanation. He says Shanti knew it was mutual. But the source material suggests, well, maybe she didn't know the full picture.
Being left off the deed to your marital home,
Yeah.
that feels significant.
It definitely raises questions about transparency, maybe power dynamics in the relationship. If she didn't know or didn't agree, that's a potential source of conflict right there.
And their living situation also gets complicated. Initially, they live together, sure. But then he admits to sometimes staying at his mom's place after arguments.
Right, this idea of taking a cool down period. He tries to downplay it, says it only happened like twice.
Only twice. But does that track with other things?
Not really, especially not when you later hear about them sleeping in separate parts of the same house. It hints at way more conflict than he's letting on.
He blames the arguments on Shanti's work stress, says it made her irritable, and his solution was just leaving.
That's the picture he paints. Minimal fighting, him just stepping away calmly. But it feels like he's building a narrative, one that doesn't quite match the emerging facts.
Which brings us to the whole TV show thing. Zombie house flipping.
Yeah, kind of a bizarre side plot, but potentially important. Keith Airy, the producer.
David was really keen to be on it, right?
Right.
Saw it as a big opportunity. Trade-outs, sponsorships for the renovation.
Definitely. He wanted to be the star, basically. The main builder construction guy, focused on the exposure, the deals.
But Shanti wasn't so thrilled, according to Keith Airy, anyway.
That's the testimony, yeah. Airy described a meeting just 6 days before she died, said it was tense. Shanti seemed unhappy to even be there.
Unhappy.
And left early.
Apparently so, which really clashes with the idea David's presenting of them being this united team tackling the renovation for the show.
If she wasn't on board with something he clearly wanted so badly, that could be a major point of friction, couldn't it?
Absolutely. Another layer suggesting the relationship wasn't as smooth as David initially portrayed.
Okay, let's nail down the timeline for those last few days.
Yeah.
Sunday, before she died, what did he say happened?
He described it as a pretty normal family day. They ate early, watched a movie, went to bed around 9 p.m. Shanti's son was there, left Monday afternoon around 5 p.m.
And mundane?
Dinner together, watched American Idol, just ordinary stuff.
Setting the scene of normality right before.
Exactly. Makes Tuesday stand out more.
So Tuesday morning, this is critical. David says he slept where?
On the couch. In the garage. In the garage. Okay. Shanti comes downstairs after 7 a.m., goes back up. He's doing chores.
Already that separation is notable, isn't it? Him in the garage, her upstairs.
Then the last time he claims he saw her alive. Around 9:01 a.m. Tuesday?
Correct. Says she told him she's going to the dentist. He said he's going for a walk.
And this is when he does another one of those fake cries during the interrogation.
Yes. And the report says the detective just ignores it this time, doesn't react.
A shift in tactics, maybe? They're not buying it anymore.
Seems likely. The detective's lack of response sends a message. They're focusing on the facts now, the timeline he's giving.
His walk took him towards Lake to Orange.
That's what he stated.
Then he gets back, feeds the dogs, then goes upstairs to check on Shanti. Why then?
His reason was about coordinating picking up her son. That's the point he claims he makes the discovery.
How does he describe finding her? Starts with hearing water.
Yeah, hearing trickling water from the garage apartment bathroom. But his description of going in, it's odd.
How?
He says something like, yeah, I walk into the bathroom. Almost. Annoyed. Passive-aggressive. It's a strange tone for recounting finding your wife.
Like he's put out by having to tell the story. Weird.
Very weird. Then he describes the scene, finding her head in the corner of the tub, calls it extremely awful, not natural.
Okay, those sound like appropriate descriptions.
Sure, but then the other details, rose-colored water, implying blood, a spot of blood somewhere else, says she felt stiff, cold. He claims he turned off the lukewarm water, heard it drain, pulled her out.
Right, but then the snack.
Yes, the truly bizarre detail. He's recounting this horrific scene, and he mentions he was eating a snack at the time he was telling the police this.
Eating, while describing pulling his possibly dead wife from a tub.
The mismatch is jarring. Describing trauma while casually eating, it just doesn't compute with expected grief responses. It's chilling.
Definitely a huge red flag. So the detectives start pressing on inconsistencies. They ask about the last argument.
He brings up a minor one from Saturday about the renovation, the upstairs floor being wavy.
And his take.
He insists they were on the same page, both upset about the delay, but in agreement. Again, minimizing conflict.
Trying to make it seem like there was no major fight leading up to Tuesday.
Exactly. Deflecting any idea that marital problems were a factor.
Then they ask point blank about physical violence.
And he denies everything, strongly. No physical fights, never harmed her, no choking, strangling, beating, hitting. Complete denial.
Which is crucial given what comes out later about her injury.
Absolutely. And he claims he has no injuries, except maybe some scratches from plants or something.
While Shanti had significant injuries. We'll get to that. But first, the earring.
Right, the single diamond earring found on the nightstand.
The detective suggests what? That she took it off before bed.
Yeah, implying the attack happened after her usual routine, maybe when she was asleep or getting ready for bed. Why else would just one earring be off and left there?
It points to something sudden, violent, interrupting her normal pattern.
It's a small detail, but it chips away at David's narrative of finding her after she'd been in the bath.
Then they ask him about a polygraph. A lie detector test.
And he agrees immediately. Absolutely, he says.
So they don't actually do it.
No. He waits for over 2 hours, apparently, but then they decide not to proceed.
Why not? Just a tactic?
Could be. The weight itself adds pressure, or maybe they felt they already had enough inconsistencies, enough behavioral flags to move to a more direct confrontation. They didn't need the polygraph result anymore.
And that confrontation comes next.
It does. The detective starts hitting him with the contradictions, the whole sleeping arrangement downstairs.
David's defense is just, I only slept there.
Pretty much. Tries to brush it off. But the detective pushes back, points out how uncomfortable that sounds. Shanti in the main part of the house, him in the garage with the dogs. It screams dysfunction.
It paints a picture of separation, doesn't it?
Definitely. Then the big one, the injuries. Or lack thereof on his part.
Right. He has plant scratches.
Yeah.
Shanti has.
A swollen head, black eyes, severe injuries consistent with a beating. The contrast is stark. How does he have nothing if there's some struggle or if he found her like that?
And the physical scene doesn't match his story either.
Not at all. The detective points out, no water on the floor in that bathroom? If he pulled her out of a tub, wouldn't there be water everywhere?
You'd think so.
And no blood on the carpet, despite the rose-colored water he described in pulling her out. It just doesn't add up.
The story's falling apart.
Completely. Which leads the detective to just say it.
What?
David, you killed this woman. Straight up accusation.
Wow. Direct.
And the detective also calls out the crying again. Notes he's been doing it for hours, this fake crying, without a single actual tear.
Just reinforcing their belief that it's all an act, no real remorse.
Exactly. That lack of genuine emotion, combined with the inconsistencies, it seals their perspective.
So the interrogation ends. It's almost 5 a.m. What happens then?
David just waits for over 2 more hours, then asks if he can go home.
And he agrees to have his picture taken. Cheerfully.
Yeah, the report says he was cheerful about it, which, again, after everything that just happened, accusing him of murder, that's bizarrely out of step.
Just adds to the overall strangeness.
It really does. It probably just confirmed everything for the detectives.
Fast forward 4 months, he's indicted, arrested at his mother's house.
And his reaction then? When faced with the evidence.
He apparently starts acting erratically, claims he's insane.
The insanity defense attempt.
Which leads to him spending 5 years in a psychiatric facility. Maximum security.
But eventually, they rule he is competent to stand trial.
Right. So that defense didn't ultimately work. The trial finally starts. October 12th. Last 6 days.
He pleads not guilty, sticks to the intruder story.
Unknown guy breaks in, kills Shanti, while David's conveniently out walking the dogs.
A tough story to sell, given the evidence. The prosecution hammers the inconsistencies, the sleeping arrangement, the severity of the beating compared to his lack of injuries, the lack of any evidence of an intruder.
They argue it was premeditated murder.
They do. The defense tries to counter, saying it's all circumstantial. Claims Detective Sprague was biased because of the crocodile tears. Tries to create reasonable doubt.
But the jury doesn't buy it.
Nope. Guilty. First-degree murder.
And the sentence.
Life in prison. Mandatory.
There was a victim impact statement from Shanti's son, Jackson.
Yeah, heartbreaking stuff, talking about his grief, missing his mom, just the simple everyday things, and how long they waited for justice.
What's the human cost right there?
Absolutely. A reminder of the real tragedy behind the legal proceedings.
And David Tronis now.
He's at Graceville Correctional Facility, maximum security, where he'll likely stay.
So, wrapping up this deep dive, looking back at these documents, the picture seems pretty clear.
Yeah, the inconsistencies in his story were just overwhelming. That, plus the lack of any real emotional response you'd expect, it built a strong case.
The evidence presented at trial obviously convinced the jury.
And by digging into these reports, like you did, the listener gets a real insight into how investigators work, how they analyze behavior, spot those discrepancies.
How language, emotion, or the lack of it, and physical evidence all have to line up. Or, when they don't, it raises serious questions.
Exactly. Those details are crucial.
It really makes you think, though, about the faces people present to the world. How much can be hidden?
Right. What does this case tell us about deception? About looking past the surface?
And maybe what other small details, things that seem minor at first glance, like asking for crackers or having no water on the floor, might actually be giveaways to something much darker.
It's a fascinating, if unsettling, thought. If this dive into forensic psychology, into how investigations unfold, grabbed your interest, there's definitely more to explore out there on interview techniques, behavioral analysis. It's a complex field.